In this training, we will cover special education for EMIS reporting purposes. In order to add a special education event, you will want to have the appropriate student in context and then follow the breadcrumb trail to student information, SIS, student special education. That will bring you to the special education screen. And you will see a list of any special education events. If you need to delete a record, you can click the trash can. If you need to edit a record, click the pencil and make any needed changes. And to add a new special education event, click the green button to add an event. On that screen, you will then add the event date field. That is the date that the special education event occurred. In the date type dropdown, you'll select the type of event. In the outcome ID dropdown, you will select the outcome of the event. In the outcome begin date and outcome end date fields, select the effective start date and end dates of that outcome. For IEPs only, in the IEP test type dropdown list, select the format of the test the student is required to take for all tests, whether they are required to take the alternate version or the standard version. In the secondary planning dropdown list, select the result of transition planning on the IEP for students who are 14 and older. In the non-compliance ID dropdown list, select the code identifier for the reason the event has not met federally mandated timelines if applicable. And in the event field, enter the details about the special education event for the student, which is optional. You then click save, and the event will be displayed in the list on the student's special education screen. For the next part of this training, I'm going to refer to the Period S checklist for more details on special education reporting. Some items to note: the special education manifestation determination date type is used for students who have a disability and have accumulated more than 10 days of suspensions or expulsions. The actual manifestation determination meeting is required to be held within 10 days of the date the district decided to suspend or expel the student that caused the number of absent days for the student to exceed 10. For an NIEP, no IEP is used for students who continue to receive services even though they have no active IEP. The outcome begin date would be the same as the event date, and the outcome end date is usually left blank. This is where you can choose a non-compliance ID to be used in order to designate or specify why an IEP was not reported for the student. The 10 is for a student who newly transferred in. The 11 is that the IEP expired and the new was not yet in place. And a 12 is that the IEP is current but was not reported in EMIS for the prior reporting period. Now, for returning students, any student with a disability or suspected of having a disability who was enrolled in 2021 and continues to be enrolled in this school year should have a special education event record reported for all events that occurred from July 21 through June 30th, 22. Not every student with a disability will have a special ed record reported in the first or second traditional collection request. For newly enrolled students that have a disability or suspected of having a disability, they should have at least one special education record reported by the end of the final collection request for this school year. Since the student is new to this district, it is possible to have a record with a date prior to July 1st, 2021. 8 IEPs may be reported when any of the following have occurred: either a change to an existing outcome ID element, the change to the IEP test type, change to the secondary planning element, or a change in an exemption from consequences of OGT. A CIEP is an event that is reported when the parent or guardian of a special education student has withdrawn consent to the current IEP. The CIEP cannot be reported unless a TIEP, RIEP, or IIEP is already in effect. Once the CIEP date type is reported, the student immediately becomes a non-special education student. The secondary planning element on the special ed record is used for students age 14 and above, and that determines when a student will have completed coursework and will graduate, or will have completed coursework but needs additional education services in preparation for employment or enrollment in college. Important to note here, make sure that all events that take place on or before June 30th, 2022 are entered in student information and reported in FY22S, or these students will appear on your FTE adjustment report and you will not receive the special education weighted funding for these students. In addition, if you had students in 21S that were not funded because their spring IEP event was not reported in 21S, you need to make sure that you code this year's IEP with the 09 out of compliance code to let ODE know that you were not actually out of compliance, but only failed to report the data correctly in EMIS last year. Another note here, ESCs do not report special education records for preschool students. The resident district is responsible for reporting the special education records. You will need to create an FE student graduation requirement record. The end of course exams and OGT subject areas are available in the assessment area options for the special education grad requirement records. So an FE record is reported for any student who is exempt from the graduation requirement. This does include students who are taking the alternate assessments. This record is reported whenever an IEP determination is made to add, confirm, or cancel an exemption from the consequences of any graduation assessment and/or individual graduation assessment areas. If the record is being used to report a granting of an exemption in a particular assessment area, it is reported in the first school year of the IEP determination and every year thereafter, thereby confirming that the IEP team has continued the exemption on the IEP. This is true even if there is no change in the granted exemptions from one IEP to the next. If the record is being used to report removing or canceling an exemption in a particular area, removal of the exemption is reported in the initial year of the IEP change and optionally thereafter. If the student is never exempted from a particular assessment type, then it's not necessary to report the special education graduation requirement record for that combination. Separate records are submitted per graduation assessment type and area. For example, if the student no longer needs to meet the passing requirements of 3 of the end of course subjects, then 3 records must be reported. A note that when this record is reported, a matching student special education record with a matching date and date type must be reported for the IEP that reflects the determination of the exemptions. And graduation eligibility and transcripts still look at the required for graduation checkbox on the test record. Here's a screen that will show what the graduation requirement screen will look like for you. And a note, ODE has indicated that the FE record should continue to be reported for students who have the FE record. Even if they score enough points on the assessment, they attempt to allow them to graduate utilizing their actual end of course scores. So whether they earn a high enough score to graduate or not, you should report that FE record if they do have the exemption in place. You will also want to verify your special education records. So once these special ed events have been entered, you can run the special education verification report at the district level to check for errors. Each error listed when choosing download file. Verification messages is an interactive link which brings you to the student special ed record. You can then correct any of the students who have missing events or have errors on any events for the 21-22 school year, then rerun verification to ensure that the errors have been corrected. When running verify special education for a specific S collection request, populate the run date with the last reportable date for the period, which is June 30th, 2022. To view a report of missing special ed events, you will choose the verification messages. To receive a report of all special education events, not just the students with errors, you will choose student special education events. And to receive a report listing all of the student special education graduation requirements, choose the student special education graduate requirements option. And that concludes special education for EMIS reporting. Please refer a ticket to eStaff at OME-RESA.net with any questions. Thank you.